Hello, today we're going to be making the Victoria sandwich cake. So if you look in your recipe books, the first thing we need to do is to preheat the oven to 180 degrees C, or if you've got a fan oven at home, 170 degrees C, and that'll be plenty hot enough. And the next job, number 2, is to grease and line 2 sandwich cake tins. Now these tins are 18 centimetres wide or in a diameter, and that's just right for a 3 egg mix. So we normally do this for you at school. You'd arrive and I already would have lined your tins for you, but I'm going to show you how to do it at home. So you put your tin onto a piece of baking parchment, get a pencil and then draw all the way round the bottom edge of your tin. So you end up with a circle on your paper like that. And then I'm going to fold my paper in half because I need 2 circles, and that will save me cutting out 2 separately. And then I'm going to just cut round just inside the line for 2 reasons. Firstly, it will fit better in the bottom of the tin, and secondly, it means I won't have any of the pencil in my cake product when I get to bake it later on. So cut all the way round, try and hold the 2 pieces of paper together like that, and you end up with 2 circles. And in order to put them in your tins, you need to put a little bit of oil in the bottom, and that will stop the cake sticking at the sides, and it'll help the paper to stay in the bottom of the tin. So I'm just using a piece of kitchen paper. You can use a pastry brush if you've got one at home. Just rub that oil all the way round, make sure you get into the corners, and take it all the way up the sides of the tin like that, and then do the same to the other one. So remember, these tins are 18 centimetres in diameter. And you take your circle, pop it in the tin like that, repeat with the other one like that. So that's how you'd arrive at the lesson. That would already have been done for you, and now we can move on to baking. So the next job is to weigh our ingredients. So if you get yourself a nice big bowl like that, it's going to be big enough to weigh all the ingredients into, and also to use a hand mixer without the mixture all splattering out of the bowl and onto your work surface. So I'm going to put it on my scales, and then I'm going to set my scales to 0, and I'm going to weigh in my first ingredient, which is going to be sugar, caster sugar, and I need 150 grams of caster sugar. So when you get to nearly 150, just dip it in a little bit more gently, or you can use a spoon to put the last little bit in to make sure you don't add too much. So there we are, that's 150 grams. So I'm going to set my scales back to 0 by pressing the on 0 button, and I'm going to add my next ingredient, which is margarine. So I'm going to use a knife. I find that easier to get it out of the pot, but you could use a spoon. Pop it in, 50 grams. So keep going until you get 150 grams. 137, 148, 150. Perfect. So don't forget, next ingredient, so set your scale back to 0. And now we're going to add the self-raising flour. And again, it's 150 grams. So it's 150 grams of sugar and flour and margarine. That's really easy to remember. And the final ingredient is 3 eggs. So we don't need to weigh the eggs out. So I'm going to move the scales away. I'm going to crack my eggs first of all into a cup. Partly because eggs don't crack very well on a plastic bowl like this, and secondly it means if I get any shell in with my egg, it's much easier to take it out before I add the eggs into the mixture. So I need 3 eggs. 1, 2, so gentle tap on the side of the cup, don't be too hard, and then put your thumbs in the crack and get it into the cup. So 3 eggs. Just going to give them a quick little whisk like that with a fork, and then tip them into my bowl like that. So So I've now got my sugar, my flour, my margarine and my eggs all ready to mix together. When you get to this stage, you've got a choice. You can either use a traditional wooden spoon and mix the ingredients together, and that takes a lot of elbow grease, and you'll work up quite a sweat, or you can use an electric mixer, and we've got some of these in school. You'll get to use them when you're back in. So I'm going to use an electric mixer. You put it down into your bowl and you pull the switch back towards you. It's got 3 settings, so try and switch it just to the first one to start with, and just gently mix so your ingredients start to incorporate together and you don't spray flour all over the kitchen. Otherwise that's a lot of clearing up. Once they're all mixed together, you can switch it to number 3 and give it a really good mix, just for 30 seconds to a minute, until all of the ingredients are incorporated together. You can see that the mixture is beginning to turn much more pale, but I've still got some mix at the side of the bowl, so I'm just going to scrape all that down before I do my final mix. There, I'm happy with that now. That's nicely mixed together. In order to get the beaters out of the mixer, you just press the button on the top to release them, like that, and tap them gently on the side of the bowl to release most of the cake mixture so it doesn't get wasted. So I'm going to use my spatula just to scrape around the side of the bowl, like that, get all my mix together, and I'm going to put it into my 2 tins, half in each. So you can do this by eye. Sometimes if you watch a TV programme on baking, they'll weigh the mixture. They like to be very accurate. You could do that if you wanted to, that's good practice, but I'm just going to do it by eye. I'm going to get myself a knife so I can scrape the mix off the spatula like that. And have one final scrape around the bowl. You see the bowl's virtually clean, so that's really good. There's no waste there. And also when I come to wash up, it means my water's not going to turn really dirty because most of the mix is in my cake pan where it should be. Now they're not quite even, you can tell that. So I'm going to take a little bit off that one, pop it on there, like that. And then with a knife, just spread my mix round so it's nice and even across the tin. That's one. Same on this one, spread it round. And then they're going to be ready to go into the oven. So remember, we've preheated our oven. So it's 180 degrees or 170 fan. And I'm going to put them in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes. So I'll set my timer for 15 minutes and then I'll have a little peer through the door of the oven to see how they're doing. But I'm not going to open the oven until I'm sure they're cooked because I don't want the heat to escape. Now, while your cake's cooking, it's a good opportunity for you to make the filling for your Victoria sandwich. If you look in the school recipe book, it just says that we're going to be putting some jam in the cake. And that's because when we're in school, we don't have time to make buttercream or to whip fresh cream to put in the cake before you take it home. But now you're cooking from home, you've got plenty of time. So you can either get some double or whipping cream, about 300 mils, and whip that up and put that in your cake with your jam. Or you can make some buttercream like I'm going to do now. So I've put 60 grams of butter in a bowl and I'm just going to soften it up with my hand mixer. Like that. You can see it's just breaking down a little bit. It'll make it much easier for me to incorporate the icing sugar as well. So I had 60 grams of butter, and to that 60 grams of butter I'm going to add 120 grams of icing sugar. So it's twice as much sugar, icing sugar, as it is to the butter that you've got in your bowl. I'm going to put about half of it in to start with and mix that in. And you'll see when I start mixing, there's a fine dust where all the icing sugar sort of sprays everywhere, and we don't want the whole lot in there at once. It'll get very messy. There, you can see that's beginning to get incorporated into that. So I'm going to put the rest of the icing sugar in, and I'm also going to put half a teaspoon of vanilla extract for some extra flavour. There we are. And also 1 teaspoon of milk, just to help it come together. There. Right, just get that a little bit down from the side of the bowl. Off we go. There, you can see that it's really beginning to come together now. We want it to get creamy and soft, so it's nice and easy to spread. Just like that. And again, when you finish mixing, push the button on the top of your mixer, the beaters will be released, and then this time I'm just going to use a knife to gently scrape all the buttercream out from my beaters. Now my cakes have had 20 minutes in the oven, and you can tell that they're cooked, firstly because they've got a lovely golden brown colour to them, and when you press them, so secondly, just bounces back up again. If it wasn't cooked, it would leave a little dent in the cake and you'd need to cook it for a bit longer. And another thing to look for is that the cake just begins to come away from the edge of the tin as it's finally cooked. So there are 3 good things to be looking for to know that it's completely ready to come out the oven. They've been cooling for 5 minutes, and now I'm going to take them out of their tins. So you can either use a palette knife, or if you haven't got a palette knife, you can use a knife. That's a bit dirty, it's still got my butter on. But you just run the palette knife round the edge of the tin. So you can see I'm holding the palette knife still, and I'm rotating the tin all the way round. And the tins are cool enough to handle now because they've been out of the oven for 5 minutes or so. Don't do this if they're straight out of the oven because you'll burn yourself. So keep turning them around like that until I get back to the beginning. And I'm going to turn it upside down like that. It comes out very easily. Same for the other one. And then just peel the baking parchment off like that. And I'm going to leave them now to cool down until they're completely cool to the touch. Right, so I've left my cakes to cool. They've probably taken about 15 minutes or so, and they're nice and cool now, ready to have the buttercream and the jam added to them. So I'm going to take my jam, probably about 2 spoonfuls will be plenty, and then I'm going to spread it over the cake. Now, Mrs. Halloran would spread her jam like this using the back of the spoon, but I prefer to use a knife, and either method is perfectly acceptable. It just depends what you find easiest. So spread it right to the edges so that the edges aren't dry, like that. There we are. So that's the jam, and now I'm going to put the buttercream on the other side. When you put your buttercream on, just dot it around the cake a little bit so you don't have to spread it too far. So lots of little blobs all over your cake, like that. Get the last bit out of the bowl. And again, you can either use a spoon to do this or a knife. I'm just going to spread it right to the edges. Make sure it's even, so everybody who eats the cake has some buttercream. Like that. Try not to lift the knife right up off of the cake because you'll end up bringing cake crumbs into your buttercream. There. So just scrape that last little bit off. Pop it on the cake. And then the last thing to do is to lift one half and gently flip it over on top of the other, like that. So there you have your lovely finished Victoria sandwich. You could either put that into a cake tin, or you could put it on a plate, or I'm going to put it on this lovely old cake stand that I've got. And just for a final touch, get a sieve. I've got a tiny sieve here that I like to use, but any sieve will do. And a tiny little bit of icing sugar on a teaspoon. And then I'm just going to dust the top of my Victoria sandwich with my icing sugar for that extra professional touch. So I hope you enjoy eating your cakes, and we look forward to seeing some pictures of them via Mrs. Halloran's Google Classroom. Thank you. Bye-bye.